Shalom, salam. Welcome to our 2020 Annual Interfaith Thanksgiving service. Of course, we would all like to be together this evening. Another example of how this virus has changed our lives so significantly these last 8 months. So we will not have our pie reception, but we will be nourished by each other's company. So following this video service, we will gather in our virtual breakout rooms and spend some time being with each other and reflecting on our theme this evening. When Reverend Sammy Cantormand and myself talked about our theme this year, it was a fast conversation, because many of us in the faith community have dedicated this year and beyond to listening to the stories and thoughts of our Black and brown brothers, sisters, and beloveds. So our theme is Black Lives Matter, and we have asked religious leaders in our faith community to share some thoughts on this theme. I want to thank my clergy partner, Cantor Amanda Edmondson from Temple Emanu-El, for organizing the music for this evening's service. I also wish to thank Oliver Hausman, who put this video together. Thank you, Oliver. I invite us all to take a deep breath in, exhaling out. At this moment, my friends, we are one community. Let us begin.
Well, greetings, my friends. I am the Reverend Sammy Evans, and I serve as the pastor of the Stone Church of Willow Glen. I am overjoyed to have this opportunity to gather with you all in this digital age of YouTube and Zoom. I'm endlessly grateful to Rabbi Dana, to Cantor Amanda, and to Tech Extraordinaire Oliver. Thank you all at Temple Emanu-El for convening us and allowing this service to happen. It is so important and such a joy that we get to come together, because there is so much going on in the world, and there are so many opportunities to learn and to grow, which really is just a nice way of saying that there are many challenges before us, and we're living in a failure-rich environment. Opportunities to learn and grow. In many of my circles, including my church, my denomination, my family, and even in my friend circles, the foremost challenge we are all facing is how to dismantle white supremacy, how to find ourselves, locate ourselves within this system, and how to dismantle it. Some of us are being confronted for the first time with how pervasive white supremacy is in all of our institutions. Some of us are just awakening to how deeply entrenched anti-Black racism is in our nation, in our government, in our churches, our community organizations, our houses of faith, even in the very stories about who we are. Because of this, many of us are experiencing an ontological crisis, an identity crisis. And this is especially true for those of us who are whites, but not exclusively so. Because white supremacy sets neighbor against neighbor regardless of the color of your skin, ethnicity, or country of origin. And so for many of us, we're being confronted with the fact that the story we have inherited, the story our parents and our teachers told us, the story of the American dream, the great melting pot where anyone can come and thrive. This story, upon which we have built our lives, our identities, our understanding of who we are and how we fit into this bigger American picture, this story, it turns out, is a lie. And facing this lie often feels impossible and downright terrifying. It causes us to fear that if our story is a lie, then so too is our ontology, meaning the very nature of our beings, who we actually fundamentally are. We fear that if we accept that our inherited story is built on a faulty foundation, what will it mean of the stories for who we say we are? How will we say what makes us us? The grace in all of this, as people of faith, is that we have not only inherited a US American story, we have inherited the stories of our faith traditions. We inherit the stories of our people who generation after generation sought deeper truth and meaning in their existence, who imagined a world full of beauty and justice, of connection, of love. And in this story, our nature, our ontology, who we actually fundamentally, inherently are, according to every faith tradition I know, is rooted in the basic belief that all living beings are good and worthy and beautiful. In Hebrew, the word is tov. And I come back to this word time and time again when the Creator was creating and forming all living beings. God formed us along with everything else in creation and called us tov. The psalmist relies on this fundamental truth as well. I am fearfully and wonderfully made, she declares, for that is what she is, and that is what we are. And so, my dear friends, wherever you find yourself on this journey of dismantling white supremacy, I invite you to begin with this story, with this belief and conviction that we are good, that we are beautiful, that we are worthy. And if you are questioning your story because your life was built on the lies of white supremacy, take heart and remember that you have another story upon which to build your identity. And if you are questioning your story because white supremacy has asserted that you are unworthy or inherently bad because of your race, your ethnicity, religion, country of origin, sexual or gender identity, remember that you too have a different story. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, all of us. Let this eternal truth guide every interaction we have, every relationship we foster, every policy we work on, every vote we cast. Let this eternal truth become the bedrock of the chapters in the story to come. Amen.
I stand before you, a white Jewish man, as witness to the treatment of black lives in this country, in Israel, and throughout the world. Ashamed as I am that racism exists within Israel, against Ethiopian Israelis, against African asylum seekers, against Arab Israelis, among other people of color, I acknowledge that I must hold myself accountable for allowing racism to exist among my Jewish population. So many white Jews have benefited from white privilege and have not stood up for people of color. I know that this moment is not about my comfort. In fact, this is the moment to accept discomfort, knowing that actions or inactions of white Jews have contributed to ongoing racial injustice. I'm calling upon every white Jew to commit to the struggle for racial justice. This moment is about heeding a call to justice, because black lives matter. My friends, the pain of systemic racism and police brutality is not only counted in the death toll, its shadow hangs heavy every day over black and brown people in interactions with the police in every city and in every town. It's the havoc wreaked on the families and loved ones of black and brown people for generations. We must stand up against racism and racist policies because black lives matter. We must all be committed to true change. We are done standing idly by, watching atrocity after atrocity. We are done with being a part of a system that regularly and consistently demonizes black Americans. We are done with white nationalism and all extreme forms of hatred. We must act now to break down those walls of racism, bigotry, and hatred. It is time we see the bright future we can create together. For now is the time, because black lives matter. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, in a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. We are all responsible because black lives matter.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
I'm the Reverend Stephanie Rose Cooper of the Episcopal Diocese of El Camino Real. The Occupy movement started in 2011. It was primarily a protest addressing social and economic inequalities in the world. We embrace a thing for a while, then get distracted by the next thing that makes demands on our time and our hearts. And by 2012, the movement fizzled out. About that time, we were shocked by the shooting of an unarmed black teenager, Trayvon Martin. The Black Lives Matter movement began in July 2013 with the use of the hashtag Black Lives Matter after Trayvon's killer was acquitted. Addressing racial injustice is a very high priority in the Episcopal Church. However, since the efforts that started long before the original BLM movement have clearly not borne enough fruit, we began a renewed effort this year to rebuild anti-racism programs, including weekly Zoom conversations. Already there are continuing distractions, not the least of which are climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the threats to our liberty and democracy. Thanksgiving is an American-born holiday. It will be very different this year. This year, may our regret for past actions against Indigenous peoples, the enslavement of Africans, and the mistreatment of many immigrant groups. Be balanced with gratitude for our many blessings and with the hope that we will have the wisdom and courage to repent, reconcile, and repair the world. Even though it's true that all lives matter, may we especially lift up the Black Lives Matter movement, because we need that constant reminder in order to avoid being distracted. I wish you many blessings for this Thanksgiving.
O God, you've called us to peace, for you are peace itself. May we have the vision to see that each of us, in some measure, can help to realize these aims. Where there are ignorance and superstition, let there be enlightenment and knowledge. Where there are prejudice and hatred, let there be acceptance and love. Where there are fear and suspicion, let there be confidence and trust. Where there are tyranny and oppression, let there be freedom and justice. Where there are poverty and disease, let there be prosperity and health. Where there are strife and discord, let there be harmony and peace.
Good evening. On behalf of the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I wish you happy Thanksgiving. I'm delighted to be with you this evening. My name is Will Hogan, and I represent the San Jose stake of the church. As members of the Christian community, we are grateful to be joining hands with so many other friends of faith in expressing our love and support to the Black community and to all those who are marginalized in our country. As one of our church leaders observed, quote, "This nation's history of racism is not a happy one, and we must do better," end quote. This past October, our prophet, Russell M. Nelson, reiterated to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that, quote, "Each of us has a divine potential because each is a child of God. Each is equal in his eyes. God does not love one race more than another. His doctrine on this matter is clear. He invites all to come unto him, black and white, bond and free, male and female. Your standing before God is not determined by the color of your skin. Favor or disfavor with God is dependent upon your devotion to God and his commandments. We grieve that our Black brothers and sisters the world over are enduring the pains of racism and prejudice," end quote. In a persuasive personal essay, the Reverend Teresa A. Deer, a leader in the NAACP, reminds us that, quote, "Racism thrives on hatred, oppression, collusion, passivity, indifference, and silence," end quote. As citizens and faith-filled individuals, we must do better to root out racism. Years ago, the prophet Joseph Smith taught, quote, "It is a time-honored adage that love begets love. Let us pour forth love, show forth our kindness unto all mankind," end quote. Now, almost 200 years later, President Nelson, our current prophet, exhorts us to show love and kindness to all. He has admonished us by saying, quote, "I call upon our members everywhere to lead out in abandoning attitudes and actions of prejudice and to promote respect for all of God's children," end quote. Knowing that we are all children of God gives us a divine vision of the worth of others and the will and ability to rise above prejudice and racism. May we each make a commitment now to make a difference. One way to do that is simply to have a conversation with someone who looks different than we do or who holds different views than we do. Understanding eliminates apprehension.
Ubi caritas et et amor, ubi caritas Deus ibi es, ubi caritas et amor, ubi caritas Deus ibi est.
Hi, everybody. I'm Father John Pettigo. I'm with Catholic Charities. I'm the Director for Advocacy and Community Engagement. I just wanted to talk very briefly about the power of being together and the power of being at one table, and how that power of coming together at one table, though that we come from many different places, is the power of transformation. In my Catholic tradition, the Eucharist is the one symbol from which all the ministerial, pastoral, theological life comes from. It's the font from which we develop our religious and spiritual imagination. It's the fount from which we encounter our ethics of loving, of life, of creating community. The Eucharist is a place where all people gather. It should be the most inclusive table that we can possibly imagine, a place where we encounter old and young, people of all different races, people from all different nations, all people that experience and express their lives in the fullest and most amazing ways, and it's in the fullest diversity and the fullest manifestations that life experiences itself should be at that table. And our work is about listening and inviting. We listen to the voices of those who aren't coming to the table, and we listen to the voices of why they might not feel welcome to the table. And then we ask ourselves, why aren't we doing more to bring everyone together? This Eucharistic, or this table fellowship, makes us think about our race relations. It makes us think about, do people not feel comfortable coming to the table to share with us because of their race, or their expressed gender, or their expressed sexuality? Do they not feel comfortable because of their national origin, their language, their accent? Do they not feel comfortable because they may be from a different tradition or spiritual belief? Ultimately, we have to think about what we do as human beings. And it may not be in your tradition, may not be a tradition of Eucharist, but it may be still the tradition of gathering and welcoming and asking the question, who else should be at this table and who's missing? And what can we do? And what do we need to do within ourselves as individuals, but also collectively as a religious body, to be sure that all are welcome, that all have a place? In this time of racial equity, we ask ourselves, do Black lives matter? Do brown lives matter? And the answer should be yes. Then we must ask ourselves, and what are we doing to hear those voices, to make sure that they feel a sense of welcome at their table to which we are invited, and that together we discover the love within each other and we discover the love in the world. Thank you very much. Look forward to, when COVID is over, to breaking bread with all of you. Thank you.
Listen now for a word from God as it comes to us from the 139th Psalm. The psalmist writes, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you, O God, who forms my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God, how vast is the sum of them. I try to count them, they are more than the sand. I come to the end, and I am still with you.
Well, it's so nice to be here with you, Reverend Steve Pinkston. And let me just introduce him a little bit by saying he was at, down the street from where I work at Temple Emanu-El at Bellarmine for only about 40 years or so, and just retired. And so he could spend a little more time at the church that he serves also, Maranatha Christian Center here in San Jose. And I thought maybe it'd be nice for us on this Interfaith Thanksgiving, Steve, to get some perspective from you. You've been in this community a long time. I think you are one of our pillars of our community. And granted, we've worked quite a bit over this past year with our Silicon Valley Faith Leaders Collaborative that you and I have been helped to create. So with that, Steve, let's talk a little bit of what's happening. But before we jump into Black Lives Matter, I thought maybe it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about your family history. Tell us about your family.
I was raised in the Baptist church, in a Protestant church. My father was a pastor. So I'm what you would call a PK, a preacher's kid, but also the grandson of a pastor, his father, and also the great grandson of a pastor, his father. So fourth generation ordained minister. And also I had four uncles who were pastors and a great uncle who was a pastor. So I grew up in the church, understanding the golden rule for sure, to treat others like I wanted to be treated. I grew up understanding what Protestants call the greatest commandment, to love God with all my heart, soul, and strength. But second to it, to love my neighbor as I love myself. So those are the tenets that I grew up with and wanted to aspire to. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. What have been some of the experiences being raised in our country? I know you obviously are here in San Jose. You were East Coast too, right?
Correct. I was born in Rhode Island, raised till I was 15, raised in Rhode Island for 2 years only, so don't remember much of that. Raised for the most part my formative years in Asbury Park, New Jersey, home of Bruce Springsteen. And I think in many regards I had a good childhood, but there are some challenging memories that will always stick out in my mind, that always cause me to flinch, um, always cause me to look at the challenges that Black people, most Black people experience in this country. I remember walking down the street in Asbury Park when I was maybe 4 years old and having a white man spit at my mom. I remember being in kindergarten and remember going to school dressed up as Felix the Cat on Halloween. And, just like all the other kids dressed up, had my bag of candy and was walking home. Now, I lived on the west side of town, which was predominantly Black. But there were a couple white families that lived on this side of town. And walking 2 blocks to my house, 3 blocks to my house, I passed by 2 white families that live next to each other, carrying my bag of candy. And these older boys, there were 4 of them, they would not let me pass. They stopped me. I'm 5. They would not let me pass. And these white boys, they started mocking me. And instead of calling me Felix the Cat, they called me the Black Cat. They reached in my candy bag and took candy from my bag and replaced it with grass that they plucked from their lawn. And then they finally let me pass. And that was a bit of a challenging, traumatic experience for, a little 5-year-old boy. I remember a couple of years later being in 2nd grade. And again, having the class made up of predominantly, African-American young students. And this teacher, who was not the kindest teacher, said to this crowd that got a little bit noisy, a little chattery one day, to act your age and not your color. And I flinched at that, as if to say, well, is there something intrinsically wrong with being an African-American, a Black boy, that would cause me to act like a 7-year-old versus a Black young person? Act your age, not your color. That was challenging to me for sure. I remember 2 years after that, Asbury Park was a coastal city and had a beach, and my 2 best buddies, Michael Smith, I was 9, Michael Smith was 8, and Norris Williams was 10. And the 3 of us went down to the beach one summer day. I was 9, 10, and we spent some time at the beach, had fun, and we're coming back home, and we were walking through J.J. Newberry's, and we were kids laughing, talking, loud to a degree. And a store manager stopped us and challenged us as to why we were in the store, because we really hadn't gone in there to buy anything, but simply to look. And he stopped us and challenged us and called the police. Police came, they searched us, didn't find anything because we had not taken anything, had not broken anything, had not destroyed anything. But the policeman challenged us for even being in the store and took us, these 3 boys, 8, 9, and 10, these 3 boys to the police station, and then called my parents, the other boys' parents. And I remember my father having to come to the police station to pick us up. The police officers were saying, well, these guys were being disruptive in the store. And I said, Dad, we didn't do anything other than joking amongst ourselves. We didn't take anything, destroy anything in the store. And I think my father had to reflect on his life and the challenges that he had experienced, and had to say within himself, do I reflect on my experiences and look at this situation? Do I believe my son, or do I believe these police officers who have challenged me and treated me poorly in the past? I remember, a couple,
Wow.
2-3 years later. I'm sorry.
How did your dad deal with that?
I love my dad. He was, in my eyes, and I think in the eyes of congregants at the church, a great man, a humble man, a man of integrity. And he just told me, even if you're doing the right thing, there's some things that you can't do, shouldn't do. It's a shame that you were challenged, that you were stopped, that you were taken to the police station. All of that was wrong. You were in the right. Nevertheless, you have to be on your guard. You have to be careful. It was, akin, if you will, to a conversation that I'll talk about later that I had with my son when he was, well, I'll talk about it now. When my son came to Bellarmine, he's 14 and freshman and a good guy. He was a scholar athlete. He played football, ran track, and, loved math and science, will go on to become an electrical engineer and works in as an engineer now. And but I had to have that conversation that lots of Black parents have with their sons and with their daughters about, son, understand now that you're 14, you have to be very, very careful, because if you and two of your friends are driving down the street in a car, you may be considered a gang by a police officer. And he goes, "What are you talking about, Dad? I'm not a part of a gang. I don't, hurt anybody. I don't take anything that does not belong to me." And I said, "But the perception is, if 2 or 3 or 4 Black kids are together in a car and a cop sees them, that you may have done something wrong, and we're going to stop you and we're going to challenge you, like I was challenged as a 9-year-old boy." So having that conversation and having to tell him, if you get stopped while driving in a car, make sure you keep your hands in sight. Make sure you keep your hands on the wheel. Make sure you keep your hands on the dashboard. Don't have any sudden, jerky moves like that, because I want you coming home safe at night, every night. And you listen to exactly what the police officer says, and you do exactly what he says, whether you agree with him or not. You're not engaging in a debate with him. And if he tells you to step out of the car, you do that. If you can get his badge number without drawing great attention, get that. But I want you coming home safe each and every night. So many incidences. If I were to name all of them, we would run out of time. I remember when I was still back east and 12 years old, my parents moved to an adjoining town, an integrated neighborhood. And, I was out mowing and edging the lawn one Saturday and having a white man drive by and saying, "Nigger, go back to Africa." And I'm thinking, man, what do I have to do? What do I have to do to, beautify my home, my grass, and still have this ridicule, this belittling of who I am and who my family is. A month or so after that, there was a Black family that lived about 3-4 blocks away from us who had a cross burned on their lawn. And again, why? Why us? What did we do to deserve this? I remember moving to California when I was 14, in the middle of my freshman year in high school. We moved to California when I was in the middle of 9th grade. And I remember going into the counseling office to, get my schedule set for the second semester for January, and having this counselor, James Kirkland was his name, and having him, telling him that, I had this class, and, I definitely wanted to be in algebra because I had been in algebra before, and him telling me, this white man, "Well, you don't need algebra, general math will be fine for you." And I scratch my head and I look at him and I look at my mom, and my mom was insistent, "No, my son needs to be in algebra." Interesting enough, I go on to score, in the 99th percentile in the math portion of my SAT, and go on to major in biology in college and minor in math, and
Wow.
teach math at Bellarmine for, a bunch of years. And here's a man who said, "You don't need algebra. General math would be sufficient, will be enough for you."
Steve, what is the impact of these kinds of experiences on a person, though? I mean, I'm just thinking about all this, and I know you pretty well. You are an optimistic, positive, loving man. And I would think these kinds of experiences could crush a person.
Yeah. You know, I don't want to say that my experiences aren't as bad as some of my friends, but that's true. I look at two of my colleagues at Bellarmine. I'm going to get to your question. I look at two of my colleagues at Bellarmine, Mike Henry and Jerome Facione, who had encounters with police, but had police pull guns on them. Never arrest them, never charge them with any crime, made accusations, but had guns pulled on them. I never had a gun pulled on me. I've been stopped for DWB, driving while black or driving while brown, in California, 5 different occasions, in Oregon, in Washington, in New York State, never charged with anything, never issued a ticket. But I fit that description, you know. There's a robbery over here, and you fit the description of the robber. And I said, well, what was that description? Well, he was about 5'8". Well, I'm 6 foot tall. But the effect that it has is it can crush someone's spirit. I look at my parents and I praise God for the loving and giving and uplifting parents that I had, that would always encourage and always, tell me to look on the bright side of life, always telling me, yes, you can, always telling me that, I was gifted and that God made me who I am, to be proud of who I am. But it can crush your spirit. There's a reason why African-American men suffer from high blood pressure more so than any other ethnic group in the United States, and have heart disease to a higher degree than other ethnic groups in the state, in the country, in the nation. There are things that will trigger me. So I see a police officer driving down the street, and my immediate impression is not, he's my friend, he's my ally, but why is he here? What's he going to do? I'll see a white man or white men driving down the street in a truck, and it triggers the time that I was living in Oregon. Before I taught at Bellarmine, I lived and taught up in Oregon, and got chased by white men in a truck. It triggers me to the time I was driving down St. James Street in San Jose, and there was construction going on downtown, and St. James is one-way street going east. And construction caused the 2 lanes to merge into one. So a car on the right would go, car on the left would go, right, left, and it was my turn to go. And so I proceeded, and then the trucker right behind me, white guy in a truck, just started honking his horn and living on his horn and honk, 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 honk. I'm like, what's going on with him? When the road expanded and opened back up to 2 lanes, he pulled up next to me and said, "Nigga, what is wrong with you? Don't you ever get in front of a white man. I belong to the Klan. I will find you. We will kill you. Don't you ever get in front of a white man." So there are things, you ask Dana, how's it affect me? There are triggers. I'll see a police person. I'll see a guy in a truck, particularly with a gun rack in a truck, and I'll flinch, and I'll have to start taking breaths and breathe and think, all right, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay. But it's
Steve,
a challenge.
This is a crazy society we live in, and we've seen racism throughout our lifetimes, both of us. In fact, all of us watching this have seen racism our whole lives. And now we have this moment, another moment, where we have the potential of becoming an anti-racist society. Mm-hmm. What's it going to take for that to really happen? What do we really have to do to become an anti-racist society?
Rabbi Dana, you and I and so many others last week watched a conference call, if you will, with Abram X. Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist. And Kendi shares that one can't be someone who declares, I'm not racist. That one is either racist or anti-racist. There's no straddling the fence. And I agree with him so much. He talks about uplift suasion or moral suasion. And for so long, I thought because I was a PK, because, I went to seminary myself, because I was educated, because I was a kind person who loved my neighbor as I loved myself, because I try to be a humble person. I thought because of all of that was enough for people to recognize me as a good guy, to recognize me as someone who doesn't want to take from you, doesn't want to disparage you, but you can recognize me for my dignity and my self-worth, and you can respect me and be kind to me because I have that moral suasion, that uplift suasion, as Kendi says. But racists don't care about that. Don't care if you're educated or not. Don't care if you're kind and loving and giving and a good father and a good neighbor. They don't care about that. They see skin color and they say, like my daughter, when she was in second grade, I talked about my second grade teacher saying, act your age and not your color. My daughter's second grade experience was, she had a white student in her class say to her, Lauren, my parents tell me that I'm not supposed to like Negroes, but I like you. Boy, this 7-year-old boy looks at her and says, I like you, you're kind, you're nice, but my parents tell me this, it's in conflict with what I'm experiencing right now. So, I have to have that conversation with my daughter. Here's how you react to that. Here's how you treat. You don't repay evil with evil, but evil with good. You don't return darkness with darkness, but with light. So we must be anti-racist. We must speak out when we see things, when we experience things, when we're challenged by things that aren't right. There was a time in my life where I looked at the LGBTQ community, and partly because of my Christian upbringing, I looked at them and disparaged them and said, "Oh, you're going to hell. You're wrong." There was a time in my life when I looked at you, Dana, and I said, "Oh, you're wrong, and God can't love you because." And God has shown me, who am I to judge? Who am I to cast a stone? God is so much wiser and brighter and more loving than me, and I should try to love like he loves and be kind like he is kind, and give the judging over to him as to who will enter paradise, who will enter heaven, who will have that everlasting relationship with him.
Wow.
Him and her.
Wow. Reverend Steve Pinkston, this was wonderful. I so appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you. And I think, kind of ending with what you just ended with, I think it's a combination. I think we have to be loving, but if we're not actively anti-racist, nothing's going to happen. We have to be actively anti-racist. Yeah. And I appreciate you giving us that call today. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
God bless you, my friend. And to you and to your congregation, happy Thanksgiving.
And to all of us, that's right.
Won't let anybody blow it out. No, I'm gonna let it shine. Won't let anybody blow it out. No, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Shine light across the land. Yes, I'm gonna let it shine. Shine light across the land. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine my light across the land. Yes, I'm gonna let it shine. 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 Let it
Friends, before I offer a charge and blessing, I just want to first invite you to gather with us on Zoom. The information will be posted on this YouTube page, so you should just find the link that takes you to a registration page, and once you fill it out, that will give you a Zoom link. So we can all gather together on Zoom. You've got to bring your own pie, unfortunately, but it'll be an opportunity for us to gather in small groups to chat with one another. And every year we encourage folks to talk to people that they don't already know. And we all do that to some extent, but we know it can be really hard and overwhelming in a large room of lots of people. So the randomly assigned breakout rooms on Zoom offer us a special opportunity to opt in to build new relationships. So I hope that y'all will join us. And now, sisters, brothers, and siblings, I invite you to go forth into the world in peace and be of good courage. Hold fast to everything that is good and render unto no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the afflicted, and honor all beings with the breath of life, for we are all made good. And as you go, my friends, may the love of the divine, which we call by many names, go with you.